This is the Marketing Agency Power Hour, and I'm your host, Cal Wilder. Each week, we'll power through discussions on business challenges, success stories, and game-changing strategies. This show is sponsored by SmartBooks, provider of bookkeeping and accounting for marketing agencies. Let's get started. So I'm excited to be speaking with today's guest. She's an entrepreneur, a brand strategist, a storyteller, a speaker, podcast host, and a marketing leader. She has over 15 years of experience in the marketing and branding industries with a strong focus on both the corporate and entrepreneurial worlds. She's worked in marketing and branding roles for big companies like LinkedIn, Meta, and Coach, and also worked personally with executives. She's the founder and principal brand consultant at AD Consulting. Ayanna Dutton Diaz, welcome to the show.
Thank you. So I'm so excited to be here. Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. We're thrilled to have you. So, what's the single most powerful strategy for success in your firm these days?
Yes, I love this question. So clarity. Clarity for me has been the most powerful strategy for how I work with people. And this looked like helping people in organizations get really clear about who they are, what they stand for, and how do they articulate that consistently. And this, again, translates to a client, a partner, organizations. I think clarity drives everything. I always say clarity is the strategy. Without that, you don't have any foundation to stand on. And I think when people are clear about the clarity, they understand how to move with confidence, they make better decisions, and they honestly stop chasing things that just aren't aligned with their outcomes.
So that's a pretty meaty answer to unpack here, because you're not just coming up trying to help them come up with, a marketing pitch, right? You're really digging into their business strategy, right? And you're forcing some strategic decisions, which there's a lot of can be a lot of hard work and take a long time to figure out, right? So, like, what does that engagement look like for you when you start to ask them questions that they can't really answer yet?
Doing a lot of work to unpack, honestly, like really figuring out like who are you talking to? What is your why? When we think about organizations, so your mission, your vision, how does that translate? What are those goals look like long term? What are we trying to get to? And then working back from there. When it comes to an individual, because I believe that we're all our own brands first, even though a lot of people don't think so. But as an individual, you are the CEO of your own brand. And so it looks like really digging into what is the core of your values, what is your personal why, what is the impact you want to have. And then from there, doing a lot of work around it. There's a lot of different exercises we can do, a lot of strategy work, but it's starting from that core belief of understanding the why. And again, that translates across any board, right? And I think that when people think about marketing, they really need to understand the concept of branding, because branding is that core value that's going to tie everything together. Branding is figuring out like the crutch of everything, and then marketing is how you deliver them.
Okay. So how do you divide up the marketing work, and kind of you do the brand strategy and some of the branding work, but then where do you draw the line with your firm, your services versus somebody who may go execute on some initiatives related to supporting that brand?
I love this question because that was a great question I had to ask myself. I think early on in my career, I did a lot of executional level stuff, right? I was the executor driving all of the things. And then I had to really take a step back and really figure out and understand how important strategy was, not just to the brand, but to me, and how I like to think about that big picture and help really connect those dots. And so for me, when clients come to me, it's literally about that grounding work, that framework of building it, right? Like, what is our why? How are we communicating that? What does that look like? And then from there, I do a little bit of strategy and help you figure out like what are those channels you're going to deliver to? What are some campaigns we're going to work on? But then, the hope is you have a team or you're figuring it out, you're hiring whoever to actually help execute on those things on a day to day. And then I also meet my clients. I have a lot of retainer clients, we meet quarterly just to make sure that we're sticking to that big vision of the strategy that we put together. So I'm very high level on the strategy side.
Okay. And now you've worked at some, big consumer brands in the past. Who's your target client these days?
So I like to work with C-suite leaders, and I always say I like to work with newer C-suite leaders, for lack of a better way to frame that, because I think that there are a lot of people who are moving into C-suite who are unsure about how they actually claim their space, right? They're unsure about how they tell their story, how they show up. I'm sure you've seen a lot of trends with thought leadership and, really making a stand for themselves. So I feel like that's a great place for me to help support. So newer leaders, I like to say, founders who are also considered newer leaders, a lot of entrepreneurs, especially if there's like service based or product based, they hide behind that, right? They don't think that you need to actually know them. And they are the brand, they are driving this. And so helping them really identify their positioning, how they tell that story. And then also a multi hyphenate. I'm a multi hyphenate and I've done a lot of things in my career. And I know a lot of professionals are always confused on how they connect the dots, right? Especially in this economy, there are a lot of people who are, obviously losing their jobs. A lot of roles are being taken away. A lot of industries are merging. And people are like, wow, I've been behind my role for so long and I have all these passions, but I actually don't know how to convey that story. And so that's kind of the multi hyphenate like bucket where I help support them on connecting those dots.
Okay. And what's the mix between kind of corporate work versus individual work that you're doing these days?
I would say I'm probably at 80%. Well, it's by seasons. I'll say that first. So right now in this season, I'm probably 80% individuals or founders who have their own businesses and probably 20% corporate.
Okay, cool. And how does that vary by season? What drives the seasonality?
Honestly, companies and their budgets and what they're looking for, how much they're willing to invest. I think Q1 is definitely slower. I think Q2, Q3 things pick up a little bit more on the corporate side.
Yeah, because companies kind of finalize their budgets at the end of the year, beginning of the following year, and then they decide how to start spending the money in Q2 and after. Okay, cool. Um, and so what are some challenges that you've recently had to overcome or you're currently grappling with your firm?
Such a good question. And, I think it's something that constantly changes, right? So for me, one of the biggest challenges that I'm actually trying to unlearn is the idea of having to fit myself into a box. I think that someone coming from a corporate nature, right? I think that a lot of people are scared of multi-hyphenate people. They think that we do too much. There's too many things that we can tap into. And so people want to keep you in one box, one lane, and this is how you're supposed to operate. It took a long time for me to figure out that I needed to break out of that and really kind of own my unique sauce of being this multi hyphenate and all the things I can bring to a table. And once I started doing that, it was very helpful for me to kind of put myself in different spaces. So when you think about my firm or my consultancy, that's been helpful because companies are now starting to see that I do all these different things and I actually can bring a lot to their table, a lot of value to them versus them feeling like maybe I'm just like this marketing strategist, and I don't know how to support anything else. So that has been something I've been unlearning and trying to like pitch myself more of and hopefully people see the value there. And then another thing that has really been challenging is, especially as an entrepreneur, is working within my own pace, not comparing myself to others. Everyone has their own timeline and being okay with that, And, it gets difficult sometimes, but I'm trying to work on what my flow is and how I show up and what does that look like for my business ultimately.
Okay, cool. And what are your, dreams or goals for your business over the next few years? What are you trying to accomplish by owning it?
So I really, really want to be, I want, you asked about the percentage and I talked about the season. I really want to get to a space where that is probably more 50-50 of me having corporate and individuals year round. So really wanting my consultancy to be more of a trusted thought partner for organizations and individuals, really navigating the space of growth, transition, identity work. I really want the business to be known for its depth. Like, I really want people to understand that this is the core of a lot of things, and I'm the person to help lead them there. And long term, I really want to expand into more workshops. I do a few now, but more workshops, obviously more partnerships, creating a lot of frameworks to help people just articulate their value and having that show up in different ways. It could be a book, right? It could be more of a podcast layer, different things. But I really want to make sure that I'm expanding kind of my outreach on this type of work.
Okay. You mentioned partnerships with other marketing firms, or who do you like to partner with?
Brands, other brands or organizations, and that varies. It could be women led, it could be organizations that focus a lot on professional development or know that it's important to focus on that. So it depends. I'm very open. I don't want to put myself in a box. But yeah, really trying to think through like who those core people could be.
You mentioned podcast. I thought you had a podcast now, or yeah. Tell me about that.
So me and my co-founder, her name is Delilah. We have a podcast called Non-Corporate Girls, and we actually started it because we were in a space when we were younger, and we felt like we were always the onlys. You know, whether we were the only women of color, the only women, the only people who had this creative mindset, and we were in a lot of corporate spaces that just couldn't meet us where we were, and we felt like we couldn't be the only ones, and so we became each other's accountability partners and then kind of just expanded that to so many different people who are needing that support and really focusing on professional and entrepreneurial wellness, which is really important. It's like the core of everything I believe. And so our podcast talks a lot to that. And we've had a ton of guests. We've had 6 seasons, maybe like 50 plus guests, 123 episodes. And it's been really amazing, but we're tired and we need a team. And so right now we're on hiatus so we can focus on kind of individual things and then figure out how to come back together later on. But it's definitely our baby. We love it so much and we know that there's a need for it. And so that keeps us going.
Cool. So you mentioned, kind of working in some corporate environments and trying to find your way and get out of a box or whatever. Tell me a little bit about what your journey was from, from little Ayanna. You think you'd be one day owning and running your own business, and what were the key milestones along the way that got you to where you are now today?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, did I ever think I would own a business? Yes and no. I always knew I was entrepreneurial, but I didn't know. I mean, when you're little, and I had no examples of that in my life, by the way. You have no idea what that means, right? You just kind of know that maybe you don't really want to work for someone or that could look a little different. So, I had that in the back of my mind. As I navigated into adulthood, I realized that I was doing a lot of entrepreneurial things within organizations. So, really being like that entrepreneur within, but using their resources, starting things, creating things, etc. And that kind of led me to figure out, okay, what are some entrepreneurial ventures I could do for myself? So actually, when I worked in one of my jobs, I started a networking series for women. And I felt like people have a hard time networking. And so I wanted to create a curated space where women could come together and network over some type of hobby or some type of experience. And so that was really cool. I probably did like 15 different events across a year and a half, met some really great individuals. And that was like the first moment where I was like, wow, so I could actually do this or I do this. It came naturally to me. Then fast forward, going back into corporate environments again, that's when non-corporate girls came up because me and my co-founder realized that, we couldn't be the only ones. And so we turned this podcast into a business. When we first started the podcast, we thought it was just a podcast. We didn't think too much about it. And then so many people were like, wow, there's so much you could do here. And then that's when we started thinking, okay, wow, this is more of a digital platform. This is a media lifestyle platform really centered on so many things that we can really make a stamp for. And that turned into that. And then here I am with AD Consulting. And AD Consulting was definitely born from all of those experiences. Going through corporate America, I realized a lot that, like I mentioned before, people were putting me in boxes all the time, all the time. And I had to really figure out how to own that story because if you don't own your story, someone else will. And I didn't ever want that to be the case. I wanted to make sure that people understood who I was, how I was showing up, and I needed to learn that as well. And so the more I did that across different industries, like I've worked in every industry, probably except hospitality at this point, and people always like, how are you able to do that? How do you jump from one industry to the next, but still like having this trajectory? I've gotten better roles, I've gotten better companies. And I was just like, I really learned earlier on how to carve my story, how to tell my narrative, how to connect the dots for people. Because when you walk into interviews, people are not going to be like, oh, I see you do this and this. How can you be of value to us? You have to help them understand how you're going to be of value. You have to connect those dots for them. And so when I started doing that really, really well and helping other people do that, AD consulting kind of was born. It was kind of one of these things where I was like, wow, for a long time, I searched for my purpose. And then my purpose kind of found me in a way. And that's what I look at when I think about AD consulting. It's definitely my why. I definitely focus a lot on helping people tap into their potential. Like I said, own their story to a narrative, position themselves, And at the core of all of that is the clarity, the identity work. And that's what fuels me. And so that's kind of how AD was born. And it's crazy because, like I said, I've been through corporate and non-corporate environments, but all of them led me here. As crazy as they were, as toxic as some of them were, they all led me here to this experience. And so I'm really grateful for that.
What's been your biggest success that you'd point to so far at AD Consulting?
That's a good one. I would say working with a lot of my founders. I have a lot of founders that come to me, and I think just having them see the clarity, and I say clarity a lot, but having them see the clarity around their why and how it kind of all connects and having that aha moment just means so much to me. I love those moments, and I love the testimonials around it. I always love when a client comes to me and they go, I struggled. I really struggled. But after our session, I have so much, like, I see so much possibilities. I see a lot of hope. I see so many avenues and things I can do. And that really, really fuels me. And that's why I do what I do, honestly. So to me, that's like been the biggest thing that I could ever like want and hope for.
Really having a big impact on individual lives. Yes. Well, and what's been the biggest challenge the last couple of years with your business?
Scaling. I think as for many businesses, I think scaling is always a hard thing. And I think that, it takes a lot. It's like marketing. It takes a lot of test and learn, right? We have to try a lot of different things out. Something I would say is that being in life in general, you need to understand the art of the pivot, but definitely as an entrepreneur. Like pivoting is like your middle name. So really figuring out how do you continue to change things up? How do you continue to meet people where they're at? Definitely a lot of market research, making sure that you're tapping into what really fuels you because there was a point in my business where, and we talked about it earlier, where things definitely were more executional, right? And I had to have a moment of like, no, I really love the strategy piece. And so how am I going to be more narrative strategy driven than executional? And so having those boundaries, being able to understand that has been great and also challenging because there's so many pivots involved. When you're changing your services up, you're not figuring out how to communicate that. There's all these different things involved in it. But I would say those transitions, which is constant, have probably been the most challenging.
So I'm sure you and Delilah are awesome at what you do, but there'll come a time, right? You talk about scaling where you're just going to get all booked up with client work, right? And you'll have to decide, keep scale this. I'm going to have to hire an employee. I'm going to have to bring in a third partner, or somehow get somebody else to have capacity to keep supporting more and more clients. So what are your thoughts about when you hit that point? What do you think you have an idea what you'll do?
Yes, I can't wait to hit that point. Like, I would love to build a team, but I have to, I'm very strategic and it has to be very intentional. And so I'm just kind of right now, just kind of observing a lot of different things about how I work, what's working for me, what's not, to figure out who I need to bring in. And it'll start slow, right? It'll start slow of different people handling different things. I know right now, top of mind for me is figuring out. I'm definitely trying to have more visibility for myself. I teach my clients this, so I have to make sure I have enough visibility as well. So at some point, I do want to bring in some type of like management to help me kind of like secure more deals, more partnerships. I definitely know there's an aspect of PR there that I would love to bring in. I've definitely been toying around with a virtual assistant of some sort or some type of coordinator because that would be really helpful. But the other thing too, especially as an entrepreneur, you learn a lot of tools and tricks of the trade. And so working with different systems, constantly trying to figure out the right systems to work with, what's going to help me move faster, be more efficient. Those are all things that I'm constantly like exploring as well.
So I got to ask you the obligatory question since my day job is running a bookkeeping, accounting, tax, and CFO services business. So how do you go about managing the books and finances for your own business?
Well, right now I have a part-time accountant, I guess you could say. Just someone to help keep me on track. I pretty much manage my own book because I am a one-person team. And like I said, I'm still trying to figure out like what I need, what I don't need, and what to invest in, honestly, right? Like you have to be very strategic about that piece. So I kind of manage my own bookkeeping to a degree. And then I have someone support me. Checks and balances, always important. Making sure that everything is aligned, everything is good to go. So that's kind of what I do now. And in the future, like I said, I really am looking forward to expanding that. I definitely want to have a more broader system but that will come with more clients. So until I get there, I'm kind of just navigating in a way that just feels of ease to me, I guess is the best way of saying it.
Yeah. Given you're not an accountant by trade, is there anything you've learned the hard way over the last couple of years that you'd do differently with finances?
Oh my goodness. So fun story, I guess. Non-corporate girls, when we first started, we didn't file taxes for 2 years because we had met an accountant, by the way, who told us that because we're not bringing in any money, we don't need to file, which obviously is a lie. And so then the third year of our business, we had a new accountant or we had an official accountant rather, and they were like appalled that we did not file taxes. And we had to spend so much money backtracking those 2 years and then the current year. And it really put a light on how important taxes are for a business and how you need to take them seriously and have the right people support you and know what they're talking about, especially when it comes to small businesses. So actually for AD consulting, I've actually been way more intentional about finding the right accountant to help support me in the right way. Because again, I think that it's different to have an accountant who focuses on small businesses versus more personal versus larger corporations. And I just really want to make sure that I had the person that was going to meet me where I was. And so that to me was a huge learning, and I'm happy, it worked out and I learned it, but it helped me be more intentional with how I am approaching this business that I'm currently running.
Yeah, I mean, taxes can definitely get you in trouble. It's one of those compliance things. Even if you don't owe a lot of money, just not filing is can become a problem. Yeah.
Oh my god. So and a lot of people don't know that. A lot of small businesses do not know that, which is crazy.
Well, I'm looking forward to watching you grow your business, and then maybe one day we should talk about how SmartWorks can support your needs.
Yes, I would love that.
You've kind of alluded to what excites you about the future, but is there anything more you would say about what kind of gets you out of bed excited in the morning?
When I think about thinking broadly, when I think about the future and just kind of the work that I'm doing, I'm really excited to see the world shifting more to human-centered leadership. Like I always consider myself an empathetic leader, and I think that working someone who's worked in a lot of organizations where people don't leave jobs, they leave managers. I think it's really important that we're starting to really understand the importance of being human centered with leadership and what does that look like in the workplace today, and especially as entrepreneurs, how we're leading and running our own businesses with employees. And so that to me feels like a shift that's slowly starting to happen, and I'm kind of excited about. And then, just really being excited to work with people on identity work, as I like to call it, and their values and their lives, and really helping to demystify the whole concept of being a multi hyphenate. I think that we're in the world now where roles are changing, as I mentioned, roles are changing and people are evolving in such different ways. The idea of success before is very different than now, and people are really trying to figure out how to merge that in their lives. And I think this work that I'm doing is so important. It's very critical. And I think more people are starting to realize it. So more people are really starting to realize how shaping professional branding really evolves and is deeper than just surface level.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're right. The human-centric leadership is more important than ever because the workforce is more mobile and more flexible than ever. A lot of people are working from home. The idea that, you're going to work at the same company for a decade or multi-decades, most people don't do that anymore. My father worked at the same company from when he graduated grad school to when he retired, but nobody does that anymore really. And people are less tied, but they're looking a lot of people, especially young people, seem very interested in, the values that the organization has and are fulfilling, and they want to work someplace that they feel like shares their values. It's not so much about a paycheck and salary and benefits and stability. It's a lot more values and identity driven. It seems like than ever before.
100%. It's that purpose, people are looking for purpose. And so that impact I think is crucial.
What do you like to do when you're not working?
Oh my goodness. So I'm very grounded in family and community. I love spending time with my wife and our daughter and hanging with friends. And I consider myself an introvert, even though people don't think so. And so I recharge solo. So I love having that recharging time. I'm also a TV and film fanatic. Like I love watching everything. It's really how I decompress. So that's really exciting for me all the time. Whenever I have a moment, TV, film. Shopping, music, books. are really important to me. I love being able to like one of my favorite things to do is before going to bed is reading a few chapters in the book. I'm a foodie and traveling is something that totally fuels me. And so those are things I'm always looking to do as much as I can. And then quiet moments, I think that is really important to have that reflection time. I try my best to be intentional about rest as much as I can with an almost 2-year-old, life is life, but I try really hard to have those moments.
And you're in northern New Jersey, just outside of New York, right?
Yes, yes.
So you're in a great area for culture and food and entertainment and film and theater and all of that, right?
I am. I mean, I grew up in Brooklyn, and so, Brooklyn is everything. New York City in general is the mecca, but Brooklyn is everything to me. And so trying to find that over here, it's a little interesting, but at least I am adjacent. And so it's nothing for me to go to a Broadway play or, any of those things. So that's really exciting.
Nice. So if folks want to connect with you, maybe they want to talk to you about, personal branding and finding their why, or, they feel like, you know, they've got clients or their own business that could benefit. What's the best way for them to get in touch with you, Ayanna?
Yes. So you can reach out to my website, ayannadutton.com. It's very easy. You can connect with me there, schedule any type of consults you want, look at my services. I also have a Substack. It's called the Chief Purpose Officer. So you can find me there. And then on social platforms is the_Aya_brand. And then LinkedIn, it's Ayanna Dutton Diaz.
I like that. The Chief Purpose platform, you said?
Chief Purpose Officer. I consider myself a Chief Purpose Officer. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for spending time with me and our audience today, and sharing everything that you have. I can tell you're very passionate about helping your clients find their why and figure out their identity and how to tell that story themselves. So I really appreciate you coming on the show and sharing all that with the audience here.
Thank you. I really appreciate you for having me. And I really hope that, this conversation helps someone think a little differently on how they're approaching their life, especially through professionalism.
Yeah, I hope so. And if you're listening to this episode and you've enjoyed it, give you something to think about, please tell your peers about this podcast. We want to get everybody in the marketing agency or marketing industry in the U.S. to know that this podcast exists as a resource and to hear great stories from fellow business agency owners. So thank you so much, Ayanna.
Thank you. And congrats to you and all the work you're doing as well.
Thank you. So this has been another exciting episode of the Marketing Agency Power Hour. We'll see you all next time. Another episode in the books. Thank you so much for tuning in. For show notes and more, please visit marketingagencypowerhour.com. This show is sponsored by SmartBooks, providing marketing agencies with bookkeeping, accounting, and finance support. With SmartBooks, you gain the clarity and confidence to make your agency a success. Until next time.